Hey there, entrepreneur, and welcome to today's show. We're going to be talking about a topic that some of you love and some of you may not, but I am joined by Melissa Houston, who is a CPA and financial strategist for CEOs, providing business coaching and fractional CFO services. Melissa helps successful business owners increase their profit margins so they can, go figure folks, here it comes, keep more money in your pocket and increase your net worth. So she's also a contributor for Forbes.com and the host of the Business Society podcast. And again, this is the topic that, we got tons of good feedback on when I ran an entire month on money and finances, but I've also found it's one of those topics that people run away from as well. So Melissa, thank you for being on the show today.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about money.
I know. Like, I love it. Like, I'm not going to lie. Like, I'm kind of a geek for it. And obviously you are too, right?
Yeah.
But, tell us how you got to be where you are. It takes a special person to kind of go into finance.
Yeah. And it's kind of one of those lackluster stories. Being a CPA is actually my second career. So my first career was in social work.
Oh, nice.
And I worked in social work for about 6 years, and I realized it was very high burnout.
Yeah.
So, I thought if I want to raise a family, get married, I need my emotional energy to be for my family. And I figured, that was a conflict. So anyways, at that age, not knowing what to do, went to my dad, hey, don't know what to do. I'm going to do something in business. What do I do? And he's like, well, accounting is a noble profession.
Sounds like a dad thing to say.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, all right. So I looked into accounting and realized I could become a CPA and went on that path and worked in corporate and public accounting for over a decade or 2 decades, over 20 years of experience. But something was calling, and I just, I wasn't really fully satisfied with my career. And that's when I decided to go out on my own and become an entrepreneur myself. So I combined my social work skills, with my money skills.
Nice.
And now I really focus on helping people and helping them understand how important money is in their business and the money management.
Yeah. Because I think the thing is you see all these entrepreneurs that go in to make money and for the freedom and everything, but then they don't want to look at the money.
Exactly.
Always, blows my mind, but it is a very emotionally tied and charged topic for a lot of us. So tell us your story, because I think yours is really interesting when it comes to this, especially given your, decades in accounting.
Yeah, I kind of have a crazy story. So what happened with me was, I've always been money centric. When I met my husband, we always had the money conversations, laid out, our financial goals and dreams, and, kind of started working towards that. While having fun in our marriage and stuff too.
Right.
We weren't just boring people.
Just like saving. Yeah. Okay.
But, on my way, I guess it was about 6 years ago now, where I started struggling, but I didn't realize I was struggling, right? So what was happening with me is I had become so complacent. I was like in this great job. Life seemed okay. I really on the surface felt like I had absolutely nothing to complain about, and I shouldn't be ungrateful for anything.
Right.
However, underneath I was. And I started to deflect, those thoughts and that feeling like something was missing. I started filling it up with things to buy, right? So I started spending, and I realized, hey, this makes me feel good. Mm-hmm. And, like anything else, it's a little bit of a rush and it wears off, and then you want more. So in a year, I ended up blowing through $100,000 worth of credit.
Wow.
And it was huge. And I hid about half of that from my husband.
Wow.
Yeah. And he was suspicious. There were red flags, but I kept manipulating him, saying, no, everything was fine. Everything was fine. Thing is, I'm the CPA. So it just was natural for me to manage the household finances. And he kind of checked out and didn't really, pay much attention to it and trusted me. And he had no reason not to trust me until this year, this year that I'm speaking about. And of course, at the time that I was doing it, I was spending this money and I was exceeding credit limits, and I had to start borrowing from lines of credit to cover the credit card and this and that. I realized what I was doing was wrong. I realized it was totally out of character for me. However, I still chose to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And, once the poop hit the fan, I don't want to swear.
It's okay. You can. It's fine.
Okay. Once shit hit the fan, because it literally did, I remember like my husband was so disappointed when he found out. And I was like, that was my bottom.
Yeah.
Seeing his face, I was like, I cannot let this happen again. So I went on a journey of my own, trying to figure out how I allowed this to happen, because I knew better, yet I still chose not to do better. Right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my financial story, which was a bit of a mess.
Yeah. But I mean, it's messy, but I think it's common.
Yeah. Life
Right?
is messy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that, and I'm just thinking back to how many girlfriends I've heard joke about like the expenses that they're hiding from their husbands.
Yes.
Right. Like,
Yes.
oh, I hid the bags in my trunk so my husband wouldn't see them. And then I brought him in the house when he wasn't there. Or, the guys who buy the toys and then they don't show them to their wives, or like, it's an interesting thing, but like you said, there is almost like this hidden shame there, but you did it anyway. So where do you think that was rooted from?
So I'm glad you asked, because like that came from me learning. It was like a 2-year journey, trying to figure out what was happening, why I allowed this. And I finally ended up working with a coach, and I'd never worked with a coach before.
Nice.
And the coach helped me peel back the layers, because like I said, on the surface, everything was fine.
Yeah.
But as we peel back the layers, I realized, I really was not happy working in my job. I was not happy in the cubicle lifestyle, having other people dictate to me what I should be working on, what I should be doing. Like, I just felt so underutilized in my job. However, I had like, the perfect job, right? Like
the paper job on paper. Yeah.
On paper. And I felt a lot of guilt, because I shouldn't feel so ungrateful. I should feel grateful because so many people would want this job, all the emotional garbage that comes with it. Right.
Yep.
So once I realized that, really, it all came from not being true to myself. When it boils down to it, I just wasn't doing what I really wanted to do. I wasn't purpose driven.
Right.
So that flipped the switch. And, once that switch was flipped, I was 150% into building my own business and building the life that I wanted for myself. And once I did that, those feelings of, missing something or emptiness or, like a hole, whatever you want to call it, was gone.
Yeah. I mean, it's such an interesting topic, because I think, as at least over here in the States, right? I know you're in Canada, but over here in the States, it's like a thing that's like rampant, right? I mean,
same in Canada.
My girlfriends and I used to joke, especially when the pandemic first hit, like the buying that went through the roof. Like I bought like 10 coffee mugs. Why? Who the hell knows? I don't need 10 coffee mugs, right? Like, but because it was like a compulsion. And you're right. It is that filling of a void or an emotion that you don't want to deal with. But I mean, bravo to you for taking that leap, because it's very hard. I've done it, transitioning out of a role that looks really good on paper and really good to the people around you too. Right.
Yeah. And that's why I share the story, right? Because if somebody else is feeling this, don't go into, your mistakes, and don't let your mistakes define you if you've already done that mistake. Right.
Yeah.
It's never too late to change things.
Right. Exactly. And I think as long as we can keep that mindset and not like, this finite, I have to be this, or I have to be that, and nothing can ever change, like that makes life really boring too. I've always found, right? Like you can't evolve. Like, what are you going to do with yourself? Right. And I'm sure what you had to do to come out of that. So tell us a little bit about that too, for anyone who's listening too, because I think that is as brave, like to kind of come down out of the debt and, rebuild your life that way too.
Yeah. It's pretty humbling. Right. So, I mean, thankfully, because we had financial plans that we were following for almost 2 decades before this happened, gratefully, it was a little bit easier to recover from.
Right.
However, I mean, it's still, I dug a hole of 100,000. I put us behind.
Still a hole. Yeah.
It's still a hole, and it's a gaping hole. I'm not going to underplay it. The hardest part to me was getting the trust back from my husband.
Yeah.
Right. I'm so grateful that it wasn't a marriage killer.
Right.
I think it was really good that we already had that communication with money going to begin with. So when the truth came out, he knew that this wasn't like me. Right.
He knew something was wrong.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, he doesn't mean he was like forgiving right
Oh,
away.
sure. No, but there might have been a
No.
little bit of a different level of compassion versus if this had been like a pattern and this was just you doing the same thing again.
Exactly. Exactly. So, he knew it wasn't really truly who I was, and that, doing things like this was out of the ordinary. So, working back on the marriage and getting more communication going and really learning from those communication mistakes that we were making, right? For him to just completely trust me with the finances was a mistake on his part. Obviously, I made a huge mistake. And, we kind of grew together in that aspect, where it's like, okay, we're learning both from our mistakes, and we now are truly going to be partners in our financial management in the household, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was the big takeaway from the whole experience. And, you know, when I think about the mistake that I made, I am grateful for the lesson that I learned, because I took so much away from this,
Yeah.
and it changed my life. It was an
Right.
expensive mistake that changed my life, but it was still, a life changer.
Right. But I mean, you may not have woken up if it wasn't so expensive, right? If it wasn't such a big
Exactly.
thing, you may have just kind of chalked it up to whatever and, not have made the change if it wasn't the level of pain that you needed, right?
I love what you just said. You may
Thanks.
not have woken up. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, because you never know. I mean, I always look at things like that. Like, I'm always looking. I mean, we're on the resilient entrepreneur, so obviously, I'm always looking at adversity as like, something to be learned. Because if not, then it just sucks the life out of you.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
if there's nothing there to take forward.
Yeah.
So, do you see this? You must see this similar. Not the exact scenario, but similar scenarios when it comes to business owners, right?
Absolutely.
Where
Yeah.
they either aren't looking. I've seen that many a time where if I don't look at it, it doesn't exist,
Yeah.
money wise. So can you talk to us a little bit about kind of the common cases or the common things that you see when you're working
Yeah.
with business owners?
I would say 99.9 of the people I've worked with have come to me with absolutely no knowledge of what's going on in their business finances. They don't know how they're making a profit, or even if they are making a profit. So it's sweeping it under the rug. It's,
Right.
it's, having that overwhelm just feels so overwhelming to get started. And the fear of looking under the hood of the car, so to speak, right? So if they looked at their books, they're so afraid to see what they're going to see, right?
Yeah.
So overwhelm and fear is the top characteristic that I see with my clients.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure. And again, it always amazes me because you need the money to grow the business. You need the money to scale. You need money, period.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But, what would you say to somebody who is in that role right now? Because it's easy to say, well, then look at it. Right. But we all know,
Yeah.
your
No,
earlier
it's
point, it's
more
not that
than
black
that.
and white. Right.
Exactly.
So how do you walk somebody through that?
Well, first we talk about, where they're at with the situation, right? Because it's a lot of mindset.
Yeah.
Money is an emotionally charged topic.
Yes.
I have had people crying about this with me, and I feel grateful that they're in a trusted space, that they're able to show their emotions.
Yeah.
But it's that jarring for people to talk about.
Yeah.
And what we do is we figure out what's going on, because everybody's got a money story that they're carrying. It could be as early as your earliest childhood memory.
Right.
We are so ingrained about our thoughts and feelings towards money. And if you're carrying a relationship that's negative, or you have a bad relationship with money, that seeps into your business no matter what, right?
Yeah.
So we talk about what's going on and address issues that they're facing, because if you don't address them, you'll never get over them, right?
Right.
So it's a lot of working on the mindset, but also taking action and putting your lessons to work for you, right?
Yeah.
So, having somebody hold their hand while they're looking at their financials for the first time is extremely comforting, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And then working through the financials and showing them, okay, this is where you're at, but it's not going to take much to change the situation to
Yeah.
get you into a positive place,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of working through it together, and a lot of, understanding that you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Keep
That's
going.
okay.
I love what
No,
everything
I
you're
was just
saying.
going to say, and you pull the lesson when it's time to learn it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it amazes me too that sometimes, at least when I sit down with clients and we actually go through their numbers, that they think, I had one the other day who, she wants to bring in another full-time employee, all this other stuff, she wants to scale. And she thought that to get to that was thousands upon thousands of dollars because she didn't
Yeah.
have the knowledge, right? But then when we broke it down, it was completely doable.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's those types of scenarios too that I'd like to stress to, and I'm sure you do too, of like, no, it's power, right? Like
it is power. Knowledge is power, like you said earlier.
Yeah.
I love that. Right. And it's about taking charge. Like, you could be making a ton of money in your business, but if you're not managing that money, you're not building wealth. So what people often confuse is they think that the money coming in is making them wealthy, but that's not what's working, right?
Right.
Because you can easily spend that money as quickly as you're bringing it in.
Right.
But if you are being strategic and building your wealth and reinvesting that money, that's the key to financial success.
Yeah. Thank you for differentiating. We've had a couple other people on here and I love to hear it over and over again that wealth is different. Yes. Right. Wealth building is different than revenue generating, correct?
Yeah.
Like that's how I look at it, at least, right? It's the compounding nature of wealth in my mind, right? Do you agree? Like,
yeah, I completely agree. And I often talk about the difference between revenue and profit. So many people think that revenue numbers is what makes your business successful. But I have seen time and time again, successful, in air quotes, successful businesses who are making, seven figures, multiple seven figures, whatever, but they've not had any profit to show for that. And essentially what's happened is they went bankrupt because profit is what generates that keeps your business going.
Right. And it blows my mind when number one, that you have to explain the difference between those two. And it makes me worried for business owners, right? Because like you said, like these are people who are dealing in seven figures or plus, right? Like, but also there's something comforting in it too, because I know small business owners, who aren't necessarily there, who have similar issues, right? So it's not, I think if I'm someone in a small business, I may think like, oh, well, those CEOs and those big companies know what they're doing, but it's kind of reassuring to know that like we're all kind of figuring this out, right?
In the same boat. Exactly. At every stage of business, there are always going to be new challenges. And, just a simple statistic, it's a frightening statistic, but it's simple. 82% of businesses fail due to financial mismanagement.
Yikes. And that's like the major part of running a business.
Yeah. And yet it's such an overlooked part of running a business because it's not the sexy, glamorous side of the business, right?
Yeah.
People, they're thinking spreadsheets and they dread looking at them and dread looking at the numbers and get frustrated because they don't understand the equations, all that stuff, right? So that's why it's so important to have somebody, if you don't understand it, get that support, get somebody to teach you how to do this, because once you invest the time in learning this stuff, nobody can take that knowledge away from you.
Right.
And you will have that knowledge year over year over year, and you're going to build your profit year over year over year.
Yeah. And can we also talk about the fact that I hear a lot of people say, well, I outsource that. I don't need to look at it.
Oh,
that reminds me a lot of your husband, right? I
never trust that.
Maybe you should look at it though. I mean, to be honest, like not to make a joke out of it, but I hear that a lot. And I'm like, well, what happens when you're in a meeting with that accountant? What happens when you're sitting down with your team? Like, right? Can you talk about that topic, please?
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought it up, because even though you're paying somebody to help you, and essentially that's what it is, they're helping you, they're guiding you, they're showing you the way. But if you are the CEO of your business, you're responsible for all the decisions that are being made in your business. Right. So if you're blindly accepting somebody's decision and you're implementing it and you don't understand why or how or the purpose of what you're doing, that's a red flag, right?
Yeah.
You need to understand what's going on in your business so that every decision that you're making in your business is going to be a profitable one, because you're making decisions every day and you cannot consult your finance professionals every day on every decision to see if it's a good decision or a bad one. And on the other hand, too, I mean, you hear stories a lot in the news, and it's not just with celebrities. This happens to everyday people, but celebrities are trusting. I'll give you an example. Dane Cook. Did you hear that story?
No.
Oh, okay. So He had given the financial responsibility and the business management side of his business for his brother to manage, right?
No. Yeah.
And his brother took every penny that he had.
Oh gosh.
So fully trusting somebody is not a good, I know these stories, they are not the norm. I wouldn't say they're rare, but they're just not the norm.
Right.
However, this is what happens when you put 100% trust into somebody, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, these things happen. And there's a theory in internal control and auditing and accounting that if you make it open to the person, like if you put full trust into somebody, that increases the chances of them cheating you by 40%, just because
Wow.
just because they see it's an open opportunity and it's very tempting.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always a big proponent of like, you can put a certain level of trust, but question everything. Like,
Exactly.
I mean, because like you said, it's your fiduciary duty as a CEO to be asking the questions. I mean, we're not saying, because I'm also a big proponent of building the team around you, right? You don't have to know everything, but you do need to know enough to be dangerous, right? Around the things, and to be able to hold the conversation so that you can tell when something's missing or something's awry, right? Like you don't have to be the accountant, because I can see that coming from a lot of CEOs too. Like, well, why do I pay them then? Why do I have to know it?
Well, right? I mean, you pay them for the guidance and advice and all the work they're doing behind the scenes, so that when they present you the numbers, then, those are the numbers. But nobody will understand your business as much as you do, right? Yeah. So that's what I always say. If you give your financial power away and you check out of your business, you're checking out of, how your business runs. So knowing your business numbers complements you as a CEO. And it's not about, being an accountant or understanding debits and credits and getting into the weeds of things. That is not at all what you need to do as a CEO. You need that high level financial knowledge so that on the surface, it looks good. Like, like these things are being implemented correctly, and you can trust your financial reports, right? Yeah. And that's what you need to know as a CEO. You don't need to get in the weeds.
No. And I think you need to know enough in order to take leaps of the business, right? Yes. Like, at least for me, like I like knowing my numbers because I like knowing where my options are, right? My options for growth. If I don't know what my bottom line is and I think I'm making more money, then I'm going to make an option. I'm going to make a leap or make a decision that's going to be painful, or the opposite. I could be missing out on opportunities, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I imagine that's something that CEOs must do often. Like you said, that business at 7 figures that all of a sudden went bankrupt, like that took time to go bankrupt. You didn't just do it overnight.
It didn't just happen. Exactly. It's an accumulation of month over month, year over year of losses until their capital ran out. Yeah. And small businesses don't have that luxury of time.
Right. Exactly. And I mean, I can imagine understanding what your burn down rate is in a situation like that is critical, right? If you're working off a capital.
Critical.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us on the flip side of that, why do you think that business owners do have that unique ability to create wealth?
Oh, I love this because, when you're a small or medium-sized business owner, chances are you own your business 100%, right? Mm-hmm. And you can build the wealth in your business because you have more control over how much revenue you can bring in, right? So if you've decided that you want to be, like, I don't know, your business at 200,000 a year and you don't want to grow, that's fine. But if you want to create, I don't know, if you've got these big, crazy financial dreams, the best way you can do that is through owning a business. Because when you're an employee somewhere, you're just dealing with that finite salary number, right? Right. And that's what you're dealing with each and every year, or pay stub or whatever. But as a business owner, you can create so much more within that container where you've got, multiple streams of revenue coming in, and you've got different projects on the go, and you've diversified your income, and you've created passive income. There's so many opportunities to grow your wealth as a business owner. So you have to look at your business as being your biggest financial asset. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I recently read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I don't know how I didn't read that like a million years ago.
about like, and I'm reading it. I'm like, okay, some of the things, here and there I took with a grain of salt, but the biggest thing I took away was like, you lose control when you're in a salaried position, right? There are less options. Like you just gave so many great options when you're an entrepreneur of diversifying that portfolio. And so many people I think are waking up to that right now with the pandemic.
Oh yeah. With the big,
right?
great resignation and such.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So what do you think, if somebody is kind of coming out of that hole, just waking up, but they may have a lot of debt, like what do you think are the best ways to kind of get your head emotionally around it to move forward and release that, right? Because that can haunt you forever.
Yeah. Do you mean like people who are ready to leave their job, but they're still hanging on to a lot of debt?
No, I'm sorry. People who have the debt, who have kind of gotten rid of it or righted the ship. Let me restate. How do you release that shame though?
The shame around. Yeah. That's a tough one, right? Because unfortunately, things happen in life, right? And I understand that somebody would feel shame about it. However, I encourage them to release that, because what they've done, if they've managed to get out of debt and move on from it, that is a huge accomplishment. You have to like flip the script, so to speak.
Yeah.
And look at things for the way they are. Like, this is a positive move. You have done the work, you've gotten out of debt, and now you're with a clean slate, and you've learned likely from your mistakes. Yeah. And going forward, you're just a little bit more conservative. You're more careful. I mean, the debt could have been because, the pandemic hit and it was uncontrollable, and this is what they had to do to get through.
Yeah.
Or it could have been from irresponsible decisions. Whatever the backstory is, you got to let it go. They survived it, they got through it, and going forward, just being more conservative, making smarter financial decisions, and not over leveraging themselves again.
Right. Because I don't know anybody who's like, hey, I feel like going into 100K debt. Like, I don't think like anyone
Nobody's
starts
proud
off
of that.
to do that. Right. And it's never their goal, but it just becomes their goal by default. Cause like you said, like they're just not looking. They're just, if they don't look at it, it doesn't exist. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So where do you think is the best place for someone to start? Like, I mean, P&L, like what are we talking about in regards to like diving into kind of their knowledge?
Absolutely. The P&L is the first place. That is probably, that's the most used financial statement in your business. If you're going to do yourself any favor, get to know that P&L, because it gives you so much important information. It tells you how profitable your business is. You can run a P&L for the month, a quarter, for the year, all of them. You can compare year over year to see how your business is growing. You can create your operating forecast off your P&L and compare what you forecasted to what you actually achieved, and monitor the progress against your goals that way. There's so much magic in the P&L, and I love the P&L because that just tells you like that bottom line, that profit line. I mean, that is stuff to get excited about, because that profit is what you get to keep after taxes, though I have to give that caveat, right?
Thank you.
But after taxes, that's what you get to keep at the end of the day, and that's what's going to build your wealth.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had a client that like, we finally got him to a point of having just a basic, I'm talking like spreadsheet P&L, like nothing in a system, nothing like that. And the level of like just empowerment that came with just that little spreadsheet that we made him was just, it blew my mind. And that's really what I started seeing, is like, that's where that power is. Like that, like you just described, you get that profit, and then you're like, oh, the sky really is the limit, because I can do something with this. Right.
Exactly. And I love, seeing growth plans, and that's based on your P&L, and, reinvesting that profit into growing your business. You can do beautiful things.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So
I sound so corny. Eh?
No, I think it's fantastic.
I just heard myself and I'm like, wow, you're kind of laying it on thick.
No, but I think it needs to be laid on thick, because I think we are trying to penetrate multiple layers of money mindset, things here.
A lot of resistance here.
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes I even start clients with just understanding the terminology. right?
Yes.
Because they don't even, they think, like you said, revenue versus profit versus expense versus, operating fund versus like all of these things. Like, I just start by giving them like a glossary of terms.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Slowly get into learning the terminology, right? Don't overwhelm yourself. You don't need to
Right.
know it all at once.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Well, I mean, what else do you have for us, friend? Like, what else are you seeing? Because I just love everything you're saying. What else are you seeing that you haven't kind of mentioned yet, like amongst your clients? I know I saw a video on your Instagram around exit strategies, which is always a fantastic topic to
Yes.
talk about.
Yes.
But before we even touch on that, one thing I'm talking in circles. I apologize. I have so many things in my head for you.
You do.
But do you have any tips for the people who are kind of just starting out on things, like beyond like knowing your P&L, but when you're really kind of that your money is mixed potentially, you really are looking to transition into like a real business, right? I hear that a lot from people. Do you have any tips in that stage?
Absolutely. When you are first starting out, the only thing you really need to be focusing on is getting those sales. Get that money in the door, because the cash is what is fueling the business, right? The sales come in, that translates to cash. The other thing is, especially when you're starting out, keep your bank account, your personal bank account, separate from your business bank account. That's extremely important. That's a first step in growing a traditional business. But getting those sales in and not getting distracted. There's so much online where they're selling you, marketing strategies or new ideas or, big promises like, go from 0 to 1 million in, less than 6 months and all this stuff. Don't fall for it, and don't over leverage yourself at the beginning. Starting a business is very expensive at the beginning. There's a lot of cash outlay for things, and you don't need to grow so quickly that you've over leveraged yourself and then you end up falling flat on your face. Right. This is where the profit comes in. If you earn some profit in a month after you've paid yourself, because another thing I often see is business owners not paying themselves.
Exactly.
But after you pay yourself, you've got some profit, you can reinvest into the business so that you are growing at a manageable growth rate and not just trying to throw everything out there at once and ultimately not succeeding.
Yeah. I mean, one of the questions I get a lot too is when people are scaling and they are growing, like, when do I hire? How do I know at which financial tipping point I hire? Like, those kind of things, because scaling can come rapid fire at you.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's why it's so sorry.
No, go.
That's why it's so important to have that operating forecast so that you can plan out. You not only are you looking at your growth strategy, but you're looking at the expenses that go along with it, which means hiring team members. Yeah. So then you can see where you're at the spot where you can financially sustain having those extra team members coming in.
Yeah. Question for you. So, I mean, I know a lot of businesses that kind of go up and down, right? Like our operating plan will say, we're going to hit this amount of money by this, but may dip or it may come out. I get the question, well, what if I hire and then I can't afford them in 6 months? So what is your kind of recommendation on that?
Well, again, it all goes to the financial plan, right? Because if you know that it's going to dip, you're going to plan for it.
Right.
And that comes into your cash management strategy as well. However, if these are unexpected, a turn of events and you dipped and you didn't expect to, if you have a cash reserve available to get you through those harder times, that is super helpful. Cash management is a different beast, and we could spend a whole episode talking about that, but making sure that you've got a cash management plan in place to sustain these new employees is super important, right? To get you through the harder times. Everybody should have a cash reserve.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Yes.
Right?
I talked to that about with clients all the time about like pay yourself, get your capital account or whatever, your reserve account, whatever you want to call it, even if it's $100, like put it in. Can you explain why you think, I know this is going to be a very simple thing, but why do they need reserves? Because I want to drive it home. Yes. I get resistance on it.
Because life is unpredictable, and especially in the time of pandemics, we have seen this, right? So it's very normal for a business to have ups and downs in business. It fluctuates. Market demand fluctuates. Everything fluctuates and nothing is certain. So having a cash reserve that can carry you, other experts say 3 to 6 months of expenses. I personally am a very conservative person, and I would say 6 to 12 months, because right now we are dealing with such uncertain times, right?
Yeah.
So the more cash you can keep, the more or the stronger your business will be in the long run, because it'll help you get through those leaner times.
Yeah. So, and for the people who are kind of like, well, I'm barely paying my bills, how do I put a capital account? Like when, or how do I handle a situation like that? I guess like 50 bucks
Yeah.
a time. Like,
Yeah, pretty much, right?
yeah.
You put away what you can, and you also need to start figuring out how to get more revenue in the door. If you're just paying your bills, that's where the priority needs to be.
Yeah.
Get that revenue coming in, plan it out, see what you need to sustain having that revenue level coming in. I mean, I cannot stress this enough, because quite often people come to me and they're not making money. And I'm like, your problem right now is that you're not bringing in cash. You have no cash to manage.
Right.
Like I can't pull a magic wand out and create
Make it
cash
appear.
for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The only way you get cash coming in the door is through sales. So it's extremely important.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure what you're describing goes back to the don't get caught up in the hype stuff too. Like you said, the
Yeah.
marketing, I see it all the time. I'm going to spend all my time on social media posts, but not making
Yeah.
sales.
Yeah.
Or, one of my personal pet peeves are those coaches who say I can have you go 0 to 1 million in 6
Oh, that
months.
drives me nuts.
It's like, it gives me like,
It's
ugh,
false
makes
hope.
me so mad.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's no story of overnight success that
Right.
wasn't like 10 years in the making, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we always see the
Yeah.
highlight reels, but we don't see how much work went into the back end of it, how long it took for, businesses to create, that kind of revenue. Or if they are creating that revenue, do we even know if they're profitable?
Exactly. Exactly. Because I think, we never know unless you're looking directly at someone's reports. They can look really great on social media and have zero. I mean, you and I have both said it. We've both seen people who come to us who have no idea what's going on with their finances. So I want to drive that home, because I think so many people feel bad about what they're making or what they're doing, and that shame thing. But I love the fact that you're shining a light on it and saying, like, you don't need to feel the shame, because we're all in this together and you can get out of it too.
Exactly.
That's wonderful. So any last tidbits that you want to leave with the audience, like things that you really want to drive home with these folks?
You know what? There's probably so many things I didn't mention. I mean, I can go on and on about how to manage your money, but what I really want to drive home is that point we were talking about earlier, where it's not how much money you're bringing in that makes you rich. It's how you manage your money that builds your wealth.
Yes. Building wealth.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for reiterating that. And again, I think especially women, no offense to our guys, but especially women really need to be focusing on wealth building.
Yes. I write about that a lot too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I really want I want women to start realizing that it's possible for them too, because quite often I hear women telling me, I only need to make as much as I need to live off of.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why? Why is it not okay for you to want more? And then that's where the money mindset comes in.
Exactly.
Well, it's greedy to want more. Wealthy people are bad people, stuff like that. And it's like, we got to shed the shame. We've got to shed the stereotypes that women are not, or they don't have permission to build wealth, because we can do it just like anybody else. And it's totally okay for us to want more in life.
Yeah. Yeah. And that goes across the board, not just financially, folks, like all the way across the board. There was some stat I heard, I don't remember the exact numbers. I'm probably going to butcher it, but essentially it was like women in the States have more knowledge around finances than anyone in the world, but they use it the least.
Yes, I believe that.
Blows my mind. I'm like, we're so smart. We've just been told we're dumb.
Yeah.
And we believe it, unfortunately. So,
but I did just a little bit of a highlight there, though. Yeah. I did see a report. I can't remember where it was from, but saying that the Gen Zers are more likely to start investing earlier than their previous generations.
Nice.
Yeah. So at least things are starting to change.
Yeah. Which I love. I think it's coming. I'm with you. Like, I want to be optimistic about it too. And I want to be optimistic because, we're having conversations like we're having right here. That's, even if it's one person who hears it, it makes the change. Like, Job
Yeah,
done, friend. Job done.
Exactly.
Well, tell people, I know you have a wonderful free gift that you're going to give our folks. That'll be linked in the show notes, and, tell people where they can find you as well.
Yeah. So if you go to my main website is melissahoustoncpa.com, and on there is the free gift. It's the 5-step roadmap to biz finance freedom, which is the framework for CEOs to understand, the financial foundation of the business. And if you're on social media, I can be found on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and the handles are at Melissa Houston CPA.
Wonderful. And we'll have all that in the notes too, folks, because this is one person that you definitely want to go track down because she can help you. She can help you with all this stuff, and you don't have to be as scared about it. So Melissa, Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I've thoroughly enjoyed this talk.
Oh, good.